So why do TV and radio stations use 4 letters to identify themselves? We'll look at this today as call signs are explained in detail. You're listening to radio one day and you hear this is WZZZZ in Sleepyville, Virginia. Or you're watching TV and you hear this is KLOA TV, your boredom network. Where do these 4 letters, known as call signs, come from? Well, let's go take a look. Call signs have been around since telecommunication existed. First, these letters, or even numbers, were made up by the station. Unregulated, these could consist of anything they desired, in reason. Standards came along around 1912, requiring stations to have a license and use a 3-letter call sign as an identity. It became apparent within 10 years that the 3-letter system would fill up. So, in 1922, the current practice of 4-letter call signs came along. Okay, so now we have our background. Where the letters come from? Let's take a look, starting with the first. In the early 20th century, the need to standardize telecommunication globally was met. The International Telecommunication Union, located in Switzerland, started allocating letters that member stations could use at the beginning of their call signs. With that said, there are a few reserved letters for the United States. W, K, N, and the series AA through AL. Thus far, no station exists using N or AA through AL, so that leaves us with just K or W. Stations were assigned a K or W depending on which side of the country they are on. The original dividing line between K and W was roughly along the Central and Mountain Time Zone border. In 1923, the dividing line between K and W was pushed eastward to the Mississippi River, which where it is today. So on the east side you have stations like WPTZ, WISH, WCTV, and WTCI. On the west side you have stations like KING, KPWD, KNTV, and KTLA. Wherever you live in the country, you've probably only been around stations that begin with a K or W exclusively, but there are some exceptions. Immediately around the border exists a gray area, especially with states like Louisiana and Minnesota, in which the Mississippi begins and ends inside of them. The most important determining factor is the physical location of a station's city of license, which may be different from their intended broadcast region. This is why border cities, say St. Louis, can have stations that begin with a K or W, just because they're just so close to the border. But what if I told you that even stations not near the border could have the opposite beginning letter due to an odd circumstance? Well, stations like KDKA in Pittsburgh and WBAP in Fort Worth are some of the few who buck the trend. Okay, so we have our first letter, but what about the rest of them? For most of the 20th century, stations were handed out call signs using a systematic method of assignment. The first letter being the aforementioned K or W. The other letters went through the alphabet A through Z in the particular order shown here. The last letter would change first as the least significant, followed by the second once that was true. Then if they really had to, they would change the third one. This gave the FCC an exponential number of unique call signs, over 17,000. Eventually this system died out also, and they just allowed stations to choose their call sign based on whatever they desired. They could also swap their call sign with an existing station. Many stations use a 3-letter combination that describe their viewing area or city of license, kind of similar to an airport code. However, sometimes stations decided to turn their call sign into a word, a lot of cases in conjunction with the K or W. Also, some are named to relate to an organization or school, or describe the network itself. Finally, there's some that are just seemingly random as they do not give clues to city of license, company, or a word. Lastly, depending on the situation, a broadcaster may choose to use a suffix. Well, usually a station may have a dash followed by a TV, DTV, HD, FM, etc. With that said, it's also possible for 2 different broadcasters, or maybe even the same broadcaster, to have 2 different stations named after seemingly similar call signs, as long as the suffix is different. You could have WREK TV and WREK FM, and they have nothing to do with each other. Not all TV and radio is subject to having a call sign. Pretty much all cable and satellite-only TV channels do not have one. Weather radio, traffic radio, and timekeeping stations could have call signs, but it's not required by the FCC. Commonly, you see channel number or radio frequency used in logos and other advertising. This is not part of the call sign, however, it can be used to inform the public of the station. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.